How did King Janak achieve self-knowledge? In the Treta age lived a great king named Janak, who was an enlightened soul. In spite of being a king, he was known as Janak Vedehi, or one who had gone beyond body consciousness. What is important for us to know is how he was able, in the midst of his royal responsibilities, to achieve self-realization. Which technique did he use? Because he was a king and a family man, he had to perform many types of worldly duties. So how did it happen that all his actions were desireless? Why was he called Vedehi? Once, he felt tense and restless and couldn't sleep. He tried a variety of ways to relax but failed. It was past midnight before he finally dozed off. He had a dream in which he saw that his enemies had conquered him and snatched his kingdom, and he had fled into the jungle. He felt terribly hungry and begged some food from a villager. She told him that she had no cooked food to offer him, but gave him rice and lentils to cook for himself. He could not light a fire because the only wood he had was damp. He had to blow on it several times before it ignited properly, and the smoke made his eyes water. Being a king, he was not used to this kind of work and had no idea how to cook, but goaded by hunger, he managed to half-cook the food. Just as he put his meal on a leaf to cool, 2 bulls locked in combat came by and trampled his food into the ground. He was plunged into grief and wept bitterly. At this point, his dream broke. He opened his eyes and pondered, "What does it all mean? A few moments ago I was weeping for a morsel of food, and now I am back to being a mighty king. Right now I can vividly recall my dream misery. But at that time, I couldn't remember being a king who lived in magnificent splendor, nor was I aware that I was sleeping in a luxurious bed." The very next morning, he proclaimed throughout the land that whoever could satisfactorily answer his questions would become the royal guru and would receive the kingdom as a reward. He had a huge pavilion built on the outskirts of the city to receive those who were willing to try and answer his question. The pavilion had only one door, whose guard allowed entry only to the candidates. Inside there was a tall golden throne for the successful candidate who would become the king's guru. On a lower level were rows of seats for the holy men, pandits, academics, scholars, and philosophers who would attempt to answer the question. Each contestant was informed beforehand that a wrong answer would lead to imprisonment until such time as the right answer was provided by someone else. Anyone who dared to sit on the throne then gave a wrong answer would pay with his life. The great learned men of the time, the Mahatmas, Mandaleshwars, ascetics, and others gathered here, each hoping to become the royal guru. One contestant after another failed to satisfy the king and was sent to prison. Not one of them dared to sit on the throne. King Janak had only one question: is this true or is that true? Everyone tried in his own way to give a satisfactory answer. They gave answers like, "This world is unreal and God alone is real." They quoted the Vedas and other scriptures, but such superficial answers could not resolve the king's doubts. At this time, Ashtavakra had not yet been born. His father was one of the unsuccessful candidates who ended up in jail. Years passed and this was kept secret from him. Then one day his playmates taunted him that he was the son of a jailbird. This upset him greatly and he asked his mother why his father was in prison. His mother told him the whole story and added that his father could be freed only when someone else gave the correct answer. Ashtavakra exclaimed, "I will answer the king's question and free my father." His mother protested that if the greatest scholars and Mahatmas couldn't give the right answer, then how could he? But he replied, "Mother, don't worry. By my Guru Maharaj's grace, I will be sure to answer correctly. Please give me your blessing. I'll return home with father in no time at all." His mother tried in vain to stop him and was finally forced to let him go. He arrived at the entrance to the contest hall. As he was about to go inside, the sentry stopped him and said, "Don't go inside, my boy, or you'll end up as the king's prisoner." Ashtavakra replied, "I am not going to be a prisoner. I am going to answer the king's question. It is written above this door that anyone is eligible to try. If you refuse to let me in, I will have no choice but to complain to the king." That sentry was not like soldiers nowadays. He was serving in the court of a wise king. He humbly replied, "Young master, who am I to stop anyone from going inside? I only wanted to warn you because if great scholars and holy men who say things like 'I am God' have failed to answer that question, how can you, a mere child? But if you still want to go inside, then be my guest." Ashtavakra went straight to the throne and sat down. He was, by the way, deformed from birth, and his body was crooked in 8 places. The whole court burst out laughing at his disfigured appearance and jeered. "He hasn't come here to become the royal guru, but has already made himself guru." He also laughed, then turned to the king and asked, "Your Majesty, what sin have I committed that forces me to be part of such rabble? Why have you called this assembly of cobblers? How could a cobbler possibly answer your question?" The king was shocked. He humbly addressed the boy, "Sir, this is a congregation of the highest scholars, Brahmins and holy men in the land. Why have you called them cobblers?" Ashtavakra replied, "Look, your Majesty, they laugh because all they see is my deformity. Who but a cobbler knows if a skin is good or bad? A Brahmin is one who has realized God, Brahm. A true saint perceives the same soul equally in a priest, a cow, a dog, and an outcast. Bodies can be dark, fair, thin, or fat, but not the soul. It is the same in all. Sugarcane is knotted on the outside, but inside the juicy fibers run straight and smooth. So what do you think? Are these people cobblers or not?" Everyone fell silent. The king composed himself, and the hope dawned in him that this child would be the one to answer his question and calm his troubled mind. The king's minister stood before Ashtavakra and started to read the king's question. He got no further than, "Sir, King Janak's question is," when the boy interrupted him, saying, "Sir, does the king not have a tongue of his own? Is he dumb? Is that why you are reading on his behalf? Advocates are needed only in places which don't deal in truth. If someone's house is robbed, who feels sorrow? The lawyer? Is that just? Does the same apply here or not? Is this the court of truth or not? Here the question, what is truth, is being resolved. So whatever the king has to ask, let him come forward and ask it himself." King Janak then prostrated himself at Ashtavakra's feet and sincerely asked, "Master, I want to know if the waking state is true or if the dream state is true." Ashtavakra replied, "Neither is real." Janak had felt that one of them must be real and true, but when he heard both of them were unreal, his confusion and doubts increased. He was more perplexed than ever. He reflected silently for a while, then asked, "So what is real?" Ashtavakra replied, God alone is real. He is truth, consciousness, and bliss itself. His light and name dwell in the heart of every being. Fire, sun, and moon don't illuminate the true God. He is irradiated by His own self-effulgent light. Scholars search for this truth in their books, while ascetics and hermits search for it in forests and mountains. Some wander around naked in search of it. Some think that truth can be realized by standing in freezing water and tormenting themselves. Others go on pilgrimage and bathe at all the holy places in search of it. They think that taking a holy bath and sipping Ganges water is realizing the truth. Still others attempt in vain to discover truth through sacrificial rituals and throwing fragrant herbs into a sacred fire. One thinks that by giving up a certain thing, he'll find truth, while another thinks that by doing that same thing, he'll find it. But truth is not realized by any of these methods. You have a strong and sincere desire to know truth, so tell me, what will you offer me in return? By this time, the king was convinced that here was the Guru who could show him true knowledge. He said, "Sir, I promised from the start that I would offer my entire kingdom to whomever could reveal the truth to me. So I surrender my kingdom at your holy feet." Ashtavakra replied, "Because you haven't met a real saint, you're still under the delusion that the kingdom is yours to give. This kingdom existed before you were born. Your father or someone else before you also considered it to be his, and now you think it is yours. You spend a lot of money improving and developing it, but one day you'll have to leave it behind, as your predecessors did. Then your heir will also think that it is his property, but he too will have to leave it one day. However, the kingdom actually belongs to the citizens, who for their own protection appoint somebody to be king. You probably consider your wife and children to be yours, but just as pilgrims come together for a short time to bathe in a river, then go their separate ways, so too do people come together as a family only temporarily. Members of a family often live far apart, so they are separated even while they are alive. So you can't claim even your family to be yours. Death will take you away from them. We are born in a body, but it doesn't last forever. You have to leave it when you die. The rest of the family burn the body or bury it, or in some cases, leave it to jackals, vultures, fish, crows, and worms to gorge upon. The body is made from the dust of the earth, and finally, somehow or the other, goes back to its source." The king was plunged into thought. Finally he said, "Sir, my mind is mine alone, so now I offer it to you." So saying, the great King Janak bowed his head to Shri Maharaj's feet. Saint Kabir said, "Man diya, tin sab diya, man ke lar sharir, ab deve ko kuch nahi, kah gaye das Kabir. मन के हारे हार है, मन के जीते जीत, कहे कबीर हरि पाए मन ही के प्रतीत." If you have surrendered your mind, you have surrendered everything. Body goes where mind leads, and nothing remains to be given. So says Kabir the devotee, someone who has conquered his mind is the real champion. Kabir says, God is realized only when you go beyond the mind. Mind can be the cause of either bondage or liberation. Only mind connects us to worldly things. A person who diverts his mind from worldliness and attaches it to the Master's feet is assured of salvation. He achieves the highest state while he is still alive. Any guru who teaches that liberation or supreme peace is attainable only after death is encouraging a wrong kind of faith. Effort is required to achieve the highest state of consciousness. If liberation could be achieved effortlessly, then everyone would be liberated. But the path to salvation involves a lot of hard work. Easy to say, but hard to do. Janak's dream hardships had jolted him into realizing that everything in this world is unreal and transient. Ultimately, the best thing is to renounce this unreal cosmic illusion called Maya in order to realize truth, because even if realization of truth were not possible, we have to leave this world of Maya anyway when we die. King Janak had previously decided that he would become the disciple of the Guru who could show him the knowledge of God or the ultimate reality in as much time as it takes to mount a horse. Ashtavakra took Janak into the forest and told him to put one foot in his horse's stirrup. Then he said, "Sire, to whom does your mind belong?" Janak replied, "Gurudev, it is yours." Ashtavakra then revealed to him the omnipresent holy name which dwells deep within the self and said, "The true name is the indestructible, immortal word of God. It is the unchanging almighty power of God. It is the best possible way to realize God as He is. So I now command you to fix your mind, which you have surrendered, on this indwelling name at all times. If your mind is constantly united with the name, you will achieve liberation in this very life." Janak fixed his mind on the holy name and Ashtavakra went away. He wondered if he should put his other foot in the stirrup or not. Then it occurred to him, "I have surrendered my mind to Gurudev, so if he has told me to keep it on the name to the exclusion of all else, what right do I have to think about anything else?" So he tenaciously fixed his mind on the word and, standing there with one foot in the stirrup, went into samadhi. He lost all outer consciousness and achieved the state of total transcendence. Thus he was able to disconnect his awareness from his body. When Ashtavakra returned, he brought the king out of the samadhi state and said, "Now go home and, understanding the kingdom to be mine, rule it wisely and at the same time keep your mind in the name. Then nothing you do in this world can have a binding effect on you." This is how one is released from the bondage of actions, but such sacred knowledge cannot be achieved without Guru. Nirbandh bandh rahe, bandh nirbandh hoy, karm kare karta nahi, karm kahave soy. Someone who thinks that by not doing anything he is freed from the consequences of action is totally bound by the cords of that very act of renunciation. But someone who is bound by the Guru's instructions, that is, acts according to his Guru's instructions, is acting properly. He has to act, but he is freed from any consequences. On the other hand, a person who acts of his own accord, bound by the limitations of his ego, will experience the inevitable consequences. As you sow, so shall you reap. And the one who sows is the one who reaps, nobody else. This is what the Gita says. Arjuna threw down his bow and refused to fight, saying that he would rather beg than win a war by the serious sin of killing his own kith and kin. The ensuing dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna comprises the scripture known as the Bhagavad Gita. The same Arjuna who was disgusted with the world and who wanted to refrain from action, thinking that it would result in misery, after listening to Lord Krishna's teaching, actually fought so bravely and so well that his exploits are still praised. Arjuna wanted to not act and be a non-doer because he feared that he would be committing a very bad sin. Lord Krishna explained to him that nobody can escape sin simply by not doing action. Arjuna was a knight whose duty was to uphold dharma and protect the righteous by war if necessary. If he were to run away from battle, people would call him a coward. Lord Krishna revealed to him the yogic technique which frees one from all types of sin, which makes him a non-doer even in the midst of activity. Scriptures are written for the benefit of all mankind. However, it is a big mistake to think that just by reading the Gita one is freed from responsibility for his actions. As we read the Gita, we should ask ourselves, what was the method shown to Arjuna by which he was unstained by the sin of killing? Jaise jal mein kamal nirle, murga bhi nasane, surat shabd bhav sagar tariye, Nanak naam bakhane. Guru Nanak also wrote that it is essential to know what the name of God is, because it insulates a person from the world even while he is in the thick of it, just as water rolls off a duck's back. The scriptures all discuss the technique of name, meditating on which a person may act but is unaffected by it. It enables him to live in this world unaffected by Maya and finally releases him from the cycle of birth and death. Such a one merges with the divine light.